Good morning. I'm going to put this on several channels, so I'll just say good morning to all of you. This one could lose me some subscribers, maybe quite a few. I hope not, but if that's what happens, that's the way that it is. This is something I've been thinking about, talking about for a while, and recent developments have brought it to me to talk about it today. I just put up a song on the Patreon site on integrative preparedness, and I'll put it up on the Patreon sites of the others as well. It's not necessary that you go to my Patreon to watch it. You can find it on YouTube for free if you're not one of our patrons. It's called Tell My Father. It is a beautiful song. Some would call it inspirational. I will call it heartbreaking. It's a Civil War song written as a son killed in battle to his father. There's a line in there that I wore the blue, proud and true. My family wore gray instead of blue. Doesn't matter. This isn't about sides. It's not about politics. Well, it is about politics. It's about corrupt politicians. This is about fathers, sons, parents, children, war, and the draft. It was the reason that I put it up there is one of my sons sang this in a concert. I've never heard the song before. He sang it in a school concert last week, and I cried all the way through it because I understood what it meant. I don't think a lot of people there did. They probably thought it was a pretty song. But it made me think, again, about the importance of talking about this. With everything going the way that it is, our corrupt leadership in this country seems to be pushing us to a war. And the kind of war that a draft may be instituted for. I've had Kelly and I have had talks with our sons about this. Maybe someday I'll tell you what we told them. Some of you may be familiar with Smedley Butler's pamphlet, War is a Racket. Maybe I'll start with that. If you haven't read this, you should. There has not been a war that was not a racket since, the Revolution, and some would argue that that was a racket, but I don't. I don't in that. Interestingly, and maybe I'll back up for just a moment. The song of this that's up there, Tell My Father, it was about a young Union soldier who was killed, and he's talking back to his father. This was one of the most infamous uses of so-called conscription when the tyrant Abraham Lincoln, who so many people falsely hold up as a hero because his picture's in all the grade schools, and they talk about Honest Abe and all that stuff. This man was he was a tyrant. And if you know the truth about him, you know what I'm talking about. And if you think that what I just said was horrible, I just hope that you will do your own research on him and on that situation. When the southern states seceded, he put out a notice to all of the states that they were to raise 70,000 men to invade the South. And keep them from leaving the Union. That's a whole different story. But many people don't realize or don't know that many of the governors of the states said, up yours. We are not sending our sons to go off and fight a war for you, an illegal and an immoral war, to go down and kill the sons of other Americans in the South. That's not talked about. And so that's why I think that this song is heartbreaking, not inspirational, but it has to do with what I'm going to talk about today. If you haven't read this, you should. You can get it on Amazon, and I think maybe I'll read the whole thing over on Patreon one of these days. War is a Racket, Smedley Butler. He was a Marine general, highly decorated. He got the Medal of Honor and a couple of brevet medals, which makes up essentially 3 medals of honor. But he came. I'll read the first couple of small pages. You see, there's not very much, and then I'll say a few things about this. He said, "War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of the people. Only a small inside group knows what it is about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few, at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge fortunes. In the World War," and he's writing this before World War II, "a mere handful garnered the profits of the conflict. At least 21,000 new millionaires and billionaires were made in the United States during the World War. That many admitted their huge blood gains in their income tax returns. How many other war millionaires falsified their tax returns, no one knows. How many of these war millionaires shouldered a rifle? How many of them dug a trench? How many of them knew what it meant to go hungry in a rat-infested dugout? How many of them spent sleepless, frightened nights ducking shells and shrapnel and machine gun bullets? How many of them parried a bayonet thrust of an enemy? How many of them were wounded or killed in battle? Out of war, nations acquire additional territory if they are victorious. They just take it. This newly acquired territory promptly is exploited by the few, the self-same few who wrung dollars out of blood in the war. The general public shoulders the bill. And what is this bill? This bill renders a horrible accounting. Newly placed gravestones, mangled bodies, shattered minds, broken hearts and homes, economic instability, depression and all its attendant miseries, back-breaking taxation for generations and generations. For a great many years as a soldier, I had a suspicion that war was a racket. Not until I retired to civilian life did I fully appreciate it. Now that I see the international war clouds gathering as they are today, I must face it and speak out." Okay, now I don't claim to be nearly as experienced or eloquent as Butler, but I'll say that, yeah, now I think I have to speak out too. To start with, I want to explain that none of my thoughts here are directed towards any member of the military. I have a great many friends who have served in the military for a long time, ever since Vietnam. These are great people doing what they believe in and doing good work. They serve honorably, they serve well, many times at the right up to the destruction, not only death, but the destruction of their families and their personal lives. My family, people in my family have fought in World War II, World War I. We missed the Spanish-American War. We missed the Korean War. And I missed the draft in Vietnam, thankfully. I used to be sorry about that. I'm not anymore. And we served in the Civil War and the Revolution. I don't consider, and we have never considered ourselves a military family at all. It's not a tradition in our family. And we simply did it because either it was necessary or our people were drafted, and in many cases drafted into wars that the more knowledgeable people knew we had no business being in. I remember when Vietnam was hot and heavy, and I was turning 18 and 19, and at that time there was a draft, and they did it according to a lottery system. And come on in, buddy. Just a second. I'm shooting a video, but I'll be done in a few minutes. So they did it according to a lottery system. And my lottery number was very high when I hit 19, and they took you at 19. I was kind of sorry at the time that I didn't get picked because, we American boys are raised to believe. Matter of fact, Smedley Butler there talks about it later on, how when they started giving medals away, American boys love medals and they love honor and things like this. And you can really stir the heart of a so-called patriot. When you talk about, you know, uh, doing great things and going to war and going to battle and dying with honor and things like that. It really tugs at the heartstrings, or inspires young men who think that they need to find something to serve greater than themselves. Well, I'll probably make another one on that. I have explained to my sons a different thought on that. Um, so it's easy. I remember when I got missed in the draft. I was kind of sorry about it because I thought, well, it's going to be exciting and all that. My father explained it to me, and he told me we were, and he was very, very pro war at the time. And as he paid attention, he found out the truth about it. And he said, no, what we are doing is not right. And it was very surprising because if you remember back then, those of you who are old enough to remember, the hippies and all those people there were all doing their anti-war, um, demonstrations and riots, and SDS taking over universities and things like that. And they were calling it, and they were burning draft cards, and they were calling it an immoral war. And we had a lot of people that they called draft dodgers. There are still people today that look down on those people who dodged the draft. The simple fact of the matter is that those people recognized something that we didn't. And that was our country was going into a war for immoral reasons. It went into it for a lie. It stayed in a lie at the expense of over 50 million American lives and more destroyed minds than that. Ask yourself why in all these wars that we've been in since World War II, but I could include more than that, whether it's Vietnam, whether it's all the little things that we did in Central America and Asia and Africa and all these things. We've fought in more countries than most people realize exist. Most people just don't know that we have. And all the way through our little adventures over the Middle East, think about all the people who have been killed, the excellent people who have lost their lives and are living through the rest, and those who survived, how many are living the rest of their lives mangled mentally and physically. And we hold these up. Look at all of the organizations, whether it's Wounded Warrior or Disabled Veterans or the Special Operations Groups. It's important that we support these people. Well, I agree with that. These people, even though they may hold strongly to the belief that what they did was right, they were used by a corrupt system that couldn't care less about them. I tell young people now, do not go into the service. Now I'm going to say right now, I did not go into the service myself. Matter of fact, I had a brief little interlude with the Navy, which made me see right away that I wanted nothing to do with it. That has no reflection on anyone who's served. That's about the government and about military organizations. I know that many are proud of their service, and you should be. Okay, please don't take this as any denigration of the service that you rendered yourself. Going back to Vietnam, I've told this before. A friend of mine, when I explained to him, I was talking one time about Vietnam, why we were there. I explained to him the Gulf of Tonkin incident. He'd never heard of it, and so I told him to look it up. And I asked him the next day if he had, and he shook his head, and he said, no. He says, I thought about it, but I don't think that I could handle it if all the things that I did or that had happened to me over there, if I found out or if I came to believe that it was a lie. Well, it was a lie. We're coming to more lies here. I do not believe in the draft. I think that the draft is essentially slavery because, and I know right now some people are going to get their backs up because it implies a degree of state ownership of the individual. And I understand all the arguments. But what if we need to fight a war? We need the people to come up, and we need to know where these young people are so we can bring them in to the military and defend our country. Okay, let me ask you this. When was the last time we had to defend our country? And I agree that a people should be willing to stand up and defend their country. When was the last war that we had to defend our country? Can you think of one? Okay. The so-called global war on terror, that wasn't to defend our country. They sold people a bill of goods. I had a number of young men who were my students at the time, my martial arts students, that under this power of a perceived patriotism, we need to stand up, we're Americans, we're going to get those dirty, rotten scoundrels who took down those buildings, and they joined up, and some of them are just destroyed for the rest of their lives, especially those who went into special operations. And but was that to defend our country? No, it wasn't. Okay. What about all these things that we did in Central America and other parts of Asia and Africa? Was that to defend our country? No, it wasn't. Was Vietnam to defend our country? I know they told us that we couldn't allow South Vietnam to fall to North Vietnam under China and Russia because it was a domino effect. And if that happened, well, it was all going to fall apart. And we had to go over there and take care of it. And what did we do? We left. After enough millions of dollars were made by the ones who wanted to make it, after enough drugs had been brought into our country, and we left those people over there who had helped us, just like we did in Afghanistan and Iraq, who helped us. We left them at the mercy of the people who came in and jailed, tortured, slaughtered them for helping us. And we just boogied. We're good at that. We're not, Americans aren't, but our government is, because our government sees its own purpose. It couldn't care less about you or anybody else. So that wasn't. Were we fighting to defend ourselves in Korea? How's that? Was Korea going to attack us? No. Was World War II? Were we fighting to defend ourselves? Oh, I know. If we don't fight them over there, they're going to come over here, and we're all going to be speaking German. BS. Study a little bit. Understand exactly what the situation was. Same with World War I. The Europeans wanted us in that war, and our millionaires and bankers over here wanted us in that war to make money. And so they put out and they said, all right, all you big, strong men, Uncle Sam needs your help again. Remember that, Country Joe and the Fish? That wasn't about World War I, but it was about Vietnam. He's got himself in a horrible jam over in Vietnam. It's been the same BS. And then the Civil War, when Lincoln pulled in all those northern boys to invade the South and kill southern boys, was that to defend anything? No. That was an invasion of people who had already left the country. All of this is BS. And this is not unpatriotic. This is not un-American. This is anti-corrupt government. And I see the possibility of a draft coming on. And I am 100% against it, because if it ever came to the point where we have to stand up and protect our country, enough people will. We've seen. Look in the last 20 years, the so-called global war on terror. Okay, look how many young people stepped up and joined, only to be ruined. Look how our people were sacrificed, time after time after time. Look at our corrupt leadership, both political and military, and look how they threw their men, to the dogs. These things are true. If you don't realize that they are, don't get mad at me. Just study more. So if there is a draft coming, I believe there is going to be such a pushback that Vietnam will seem like small potatoes, simply because and they may need a draft now, because back when the Twin Towers came down, people had forgotten how corrupt our government was. They just thought it was stupid. Okay. And so it was easy to get them, remember that? I hear you, and pretty soon everybody around the world will hear all of you. Yay! And we went over there and accomplished what? What kind of shape is Iraq in compared to what it was? What kind of shape is Afghanistan in compared to what it was? We sacrificed all of our people for money for a few people. I've told my boys, they're not going. They're not going. I didn't raise my sons or my daughter to serve the corrupt purposes of millionaires and politicians. There is a higher purpose to serve. There is a higher purpose than ourselves, but it's not a government, and it's certainly not a corrupt government. We serve God. We take care of our families. How many families have been destroyed by those who went off thinking that they were, and I have good friends that I can say this about, they thought that they were saving the world. They thought that they were serving the needs of their own family and their own children by fighting halfway around the world. Their kids grew up without fathers, and then fathers who came back having lost the skills that would, I'd just say that family life was tough. And to a lesser extent, those of us who went into law enforcement thinking we were going to change the world by us being there. Okay, I used to think that I went in because I wanted to do a lot of good. But, I can't convince myself at this point that the world is any better place because I was a cop for however many years. Okay? Simple as that. But a lot of people, whether military or police, they do destroy their families while they're trying to serve a higher purpose. I just throw that out there. It's for each person to decide what is right for them. But the only higher purpose that I see is God, and then a family under God, led by God, and by a father and a mother who understands the proper priorities. So, anyway, I encourage you to go over and listen to that song, or just find it free on YouTube, and Tell My Father. And if it doesn't make you cry, I'd suggest you do some internal auditing. But think about this. This could be the direction that we're headed. I wasn't going to say, there's a movie that kind of I encourage everybody to watch. And it's not one of these shoot 'em up, bang, bang, blow 'em up BS movies that everybody loves so much, where people are heroically dying and giving their lives and stuff like that for bullshit reasons. But it's Shenandoah with Jimmy Stewart. And it's how he tried to keep his family out of that war they mistakenly called the Civil War. It was an invasion of another country by a tyrant. And although I wasn't going to do this, I will say that one of the reasons that I wrote the books in here was to illustrate the importance, not of government, not of forced service, not of forced conscription or slavery, but of the proper role of families and communities under God. So I hope, if I lost a bunch of people, too bad. Sorry. I'm sure there'll be other channels that you'll like much better, but that's my opinion on this, and it was time to say it. Listen to that song and think about it, and pay attention to what's going on in the world and with our government. With that, I'll tell you goodbye. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.